Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session on designing and implementing a successful data strategy in local government. Today's session has originated from various discussions across the sector with councils looking to create a data strategy. I'm Mark Williams, and I'm the Senior Advisor within the data programme, working on anything from data standards, advanced and predictive analytics, and also performance management support that the LG provides to councils. I'm very fortunate I get to speak to many people across the sector and hear what councils are achieving, and I hope to share some of that work with you today. The purpose of the session is to give the sector an inside look into data strategies and share some examples of how councils are investing in data professionals. Today, I am joined by Mark Peterson, who is the Head of Data and Insight at North Yorkshire Council, and also Nicola Mallett, who is the Head of Profession for Data and Analytics at Essex County Council, who will share with us their journey from data strategy, stakeholders, culture, and much more. Finally, for anyone joining live with us today, there'll be an opportunity for any questions and answers. Please do put your questions in the Q&A section, where we will do our best to cover as many as possible. We do have a good variation among our audience today as well, from heads of service, analytical professions, and also other service areas. Without hesitation, though, it's a pleasure to welcome two of the country's leading data experts who have done some remarkable work in this field. Please join me with a huge welcome to Mark and Nicola. Over to you.
Mark. We'll just get
Thank you, Mark.
slides up there.
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully we can see the slides. Nicola, would you like to kick off?
Yes, just introductions. So hi, my name's Nicola Mallett. I'm Head of Profession for Data Analytics at Essex County Council, and I've been in our profession for about 19 years now, starting from the very bottom into performance, right the way through to kind of developing a profession for analytics and data science.
Hi, and I'm Mark Peterson, so as the title says, Head of Data and Insight at North Yorkshire Council. Again, seasoned local authority person, 15 plus years worth of experience leading the centralised data team at North Yorkshire. And hopefully this, for this session, rather than kind of a one presentation for one organisation or another, we've come together and we're going to kind of give you a little bit of a collaboration, a duet, so to speak, I think is kind of the approach.
Perfect. So long as there's no singing. I didn't sign up for singing.
Awesome.
So before we begin, it'd be really helpful, and obviously since it's the new year, to do a little bit of poll. So hopefully a poll will be launching as we speak. We want to hear from you just before we kick off around what are your big priorities or challenges that you're facing for 2026? Please don't be shy, put them in there, have a reflection. We'll come back to them in a sec, whilst we just explain where we are in relation to our data strategies as our organisations. But please do put your challenges and priorities in the poll, and we will reflect on them slightly later. So that poll is kind of still launching. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase that culture eats strategy for breakfast and transformation for lunch, I do believe. And that signifies that our organisational culture is more influential than the actual strategy plan in determining success. So whilst we might have solid strategy, and that needs to be essential, it will actually fail if the internal culture, and that's the shared beliefs, behaviours, attitudes, don't support its execution. So we have to think about those two things in tandem in order to be successful. In Essex County Council, we've actually just completed the implementation of our first ever data strategy, which we wrote in 2020, ended in 2025, and we're actually now on to the next evolution of that. So we will share some hints and tips of things that we've learned along that way and things that we would do differently that's helped us to move from basic to intermediate as a level of organisation's maturity. Mark, if you want to explain where you guys are.
Yeah, certainly. And I can see in big bold writing in the middle, it's mentioning those three magical letters, L, G and R. So North Yorkshire Council went through local government reorganisation in April 2023. So actually we are relatively new. And I think regardless of whether you're an LGR that's coming together and an LGR that's breaking apart, the key challenges are pretty much the same. That you've got either consolidating or dividing landscape in terms of technical infrastructure, and there's obviously the challenges that go with that. Alongside kind of the parallel that runs to that is that cultural shift. We'll touch on a little bit of AI later, but we know that that's a big thing. We know the way that data is going to underpin that. And it's a complex landscape. So we've got emotional stuff with people as well as kind of technical challenges there too, on the backdrop of government just wants us all to save money as well. So there's lots going on in that, and it makes it really, really interesting.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And it's great to see some of your responses, LGR being one that is coming up for us in terms of one of our priorities as focus. So if you mind flicking through to the next slide, Mark, we kind of previously polled in previous sessions that we've run about people's big challenges and big priorities. So it's good to see there's some commonality there. And I think for us, what we found was kind of a big thing on everyone's list was being evidence driven as an organisation. And that appears on the top of the list in relation to current barriers that people face. But it's also appearing on the top of the list around priorities. So it's kind of two sides of the same coin there in terms of it's both a challenge and a barrier, but also it's a priority or something that people want to address. However, what does being evidence-driven really mean, and how do you get under the skin of that? That's a very generic, high-level, aspirational statement that, let's face it, who wouldn't want to say they want to be evidence-driven as an organisation? So for us, we are going to cover some key bits of themes in this session by what do we mean by data, what do we mean by strategy, what do we mean by literacy, why sponsor buy-in is really important, and why starting with the why and the outcomes is a really good, solid way to start. And I think kind of the best use or the best way to get under the skin of kind of what is being evidence driven is to just start using plain language. Don't use jargon and be clear about kind of why we want to define it in the first place. So an evidence driven organisation consistently uses best available evidence, whether that's data, insight, experience, research and professional judgment to inform our decisions, challenge our assumptions and learn what works. It's not a data for data's sakes activity. It's not waiting for perfection to get a perfect answer. It's not replicating professional judgment. It's simply just about better decisions, faster learning, clearer accountability to improve the outcomes for local people. So for us, we thought it was really helpful to start with a definition about what we mean when we talk about these things. And for us, that was a really good place to start when we think about any of our priorities or challenges, some of which you kind of highlighted in the polls that we've looked at.
Thanks, Nikki. And part of this is about challenging preconceptions. So one of the common preconceptions that we come across is this, that data strategy is for data nerds, right? So everybody expects that data, well, that's just the data team's responsibility. It's not the rest of the organization, but we know that it's much more complex. And actually to answer that, we kind of need to go on a little bit of journey. So we hope you guys are going to come with us. And it's two simple words. It's data and strategy. But I can now see that in the poll that data is the biggest word in there. So it probably makes sense. This is really fortuitous, definitely not rigged, that actually we understand what data means. So let's start with that. And if you think about yourselves and your other stakeholders, the people within your organizations, I've got a couple of questions. So you don't need to answer this, just think about it in your own kind of brain, is when you look at that image, your immediate feeling is that data. Now, I think for most people will look at that, it's a big spreadsheet full of numbers. I'm pretty comfy with that, and that's okay. I can think that's data. But if I bring that a little bit closer to a person, so this is a COVID blood test. Obviously, that was a major thing in our history and society. But actually, is that data? Well, that starts to feel a little bit less sure for some people. But there's a positive and a negative value against it. It's kind of categorical in that way. We can probably still go with that. But what about a conversation in the park with a friend over a cup of coffee? Does that feel like data? Now, this is where you start to see people in rooms when you talk about this, that actually they don't necessarily always see that as data. But if you think about things like social care, our really valuable, really great work that our social workers do, where they go and sit with vulnerable children, vulnerable families, vulnerable adults, and they have those really rich conversations, that's absolutely data. It has to be, and we have to think about it that way. So actually, the perception of data is something that we need to adjust, because the data that we hold isn't just audit, it isn't just analytics. It describes people, it describes communities, and it describes their relationships, it describes their memories and life experiences, and ultimately what goes well and what doesn't. So when we talk about data, although we think about it as data strategy, quite technical, mechanical, we need to be a little bit more open-minded about where that goes. So that's the data side of it. The other bit is, what do you think when someone says data strategy? Well, normally you kind of get, well, there's going to be all of these big clunky technical diagrams, and when I look at it, it's going to feel like it's like trying to read the matrix and it's really complicated. But actually, you've got to kind of look through all of that matrix view of it, and what you see is that it's not technical, it's not mechanical. It absolutely has to talk about our responsibility of how we love and care and protect digital versions of people. So it's not just data, it's a digital version. And actually the reason for that is because we know that if information about somebody gets into the wrong hands, the physical individual can come to harm because of the data. So that's where the criticality comes. Now, I have a different question for you. Is it data? Is it data? Now, this part of this, apologies if there's anybody American in the audience, it solves the problem about is it data or data? If I stick a Y in the middle of it, that fixes that problem. But on a more serious note, there's a why at the heart of data. There's a reason that we collect it. You know, we have legal responsibilities around why we collect information, but also there's why do we need that information? What change is that going to affect, and how is that going to improve things? So ultimately, we need to have this concept of a vision. You need to have your North Star for where you want to get to as an organization and how you can think about that journey to it. So I love an analogy. Anybody that's ever met me, I love an analogy. So if I think about one of the common buzz phrases at the moment is data democratization. And what does that mean? That's about making it so that people have more access to their own information so that they can use it in more creative and clever ways and actually try and affect those changes that we want. And that might, as an example, look like a buffet. So if we think about all of the delicious food on there as being the data that you can go off and get, and then actually the bit that's really important is you think about the governance. So has it been prepared within food standards? You know, have we got allergies, and do we understand those to make sure that we can protect people? There's a quality standard to that, but you absolutely want the people to be able to go and grab the bits of food that they want so they can use that and enjoy that and consume that in the best and most appropriate way.
Perfect, thank you, Mark. And I think whilst everyone's probably slightly hungry now, or eating their lunch, in order to make that kind of buffet attractable and kind of of interest to people, you need to get sponsorship, right? And I think for us that's kind of sponsorship from all levels of the organisation, but even better if it can be driven from the top. So leadership buy-in isn't just a nice to have, it's the single biggest predictor of whether a data strategy will succeed or whether it will stall. And I think that most data strategies will actually fail, not because of the tech nor the data, but because the leaders don't know how decisions are made or actually how to change an approach to making the decision in the first place. So for us in kind of Essex County Council, we have had some very strong commitment from some senior leaders for quite some time, over kind of 10 years really. And that started for us with a concept called the Essex Centre for Data Analytics. And it's a partnership venture between Essex County Council, Essex Police and the University of Essex. And we've had 3 champions that are our chief execs of those organisations. So now Nicole Wood, I probably should have updated that there. Chief Constable BJ Harrington and our Vice Chancellor of the University. And those 3 individuals have been sponsors and champions of our Essex Centre for Data Analytics. And they are passionate kind of believers in kind of supporting system transformation and collaboration, specifically with a focus on using data to help them make decisions. And I think they were quite ahead of their time by actually kind of encouraging our organisations and their organisations to use that data very proactively to help us to think about how we could predict things before they happen, how we could get ahead of the curve and prevent issues and risks from occurring. And actually, where do we need to use that data and evidence to help us make very tough decisions and prioritise, particularly when we're all having to make more kind of decisions that are actually quite tight in relation to our budgets. And that's the way that we've taught them about what data analytics actually is. You know, we brought it to life by just saying it's about predicting things, preventing things, and prioritising our activities and using the data to help us do those activities. So the power to predict, prevent and prioritise should not replace human decisions, but actually just enhance them, giving us greater confidence about how we make those decisions, or actually reducing the risk when we do take those decisions. So our sponsors have been very strong advocates within their organisations and across the Greater Essex system. And we meet with them on a quarterly basis to help us kind of lead the agenda for change. But they actually help us to shape our opportunities and advocate for the kind of power of data analytics in their organisations. So our commitment to them is that we will involve them in things like identifying new opportunities, defining and celebrating what success looks like, and telling those wonderful stories about where we've made a difference. We will keep them informed and ensure that they understand the desired outcomes and the impact of any things in our programmes of work. They will help us to ensure that our kind of organisational priorities are maintained into kind of future work plans and the future strategy. And our commitment is also to ensure that we are managing our risks and changing them appropriately in relation to the programme of work that delivers best value. Our commitment is also that we will share any feedback and lessons learned and be as honest and open as we can about where we need their help. And in return, they will share our vision and passion for the commitment of data through their organisations and their network of partners. They'll demonstrate the behaviours and actually lead the culture change in relation to the change that we're asking for. And they'll provide direction and oversight and steer where appropriate to do so. And for us, they're engaged in kind of ongoing conversations and will actively collaborate with us about opportunities for change. And if you just flick to the next slide for me, please, Mark, I think that strong commitment from the very top has really helped us to start the conversation about, well, let's develop a data strategy in the first place. So that very strong sponsorship from those three chief execs allowed us to invest time in thinking about what are our blockers, how did we need to overcome them, and what strategy we needed to wrap around that. So for us, that's how we started developing a data strategy back in 2020. And for us, we didn't just start with the things we wanted to deliver. We started by thinking about what are our baselines as an organisation? How do we get a good understanding of where we think we are? And I think armed with that kind of quote at the beginning that our culture is likely to eat our strategy for breakfast, we really thought it was appropriate to spend a little bit of time thinking about who the stakeholders were of our data strategy, who were the interested parties, who were the people impacted and affected by our data strategy. And that's important, right? Because a data strategy is organisational change. It's not a technical project. And that stakeholder mapping helps you to understand who is affected, who influences success, who will be resistant to the things that you are wanting to achieve and the outcomes, who will be a champion and help you to continue to support the cause. I think a data strategy will succeed when people change the way they're working, and you can't really change behaviours without knowing who those people are that you're working with. So for us, we started with some stakeholder mapping that looks very similar to what we've got on the screen. And don't tell them, secret, but we did map all of our senior leaders on this 2x2 grid, and we looked at their levels of interest and levels of influence. Now, we didn't share that with everybody. We did anonymise it, and we used those results to help us look at what the spread was in terms of dividing them into kind of different groups. So we looked at these groups of people that were really running, they were really data fluent, they got it, they understood it, they were advocating already. We called those our runners. They were already on the path for using data analytics. We then had a group of people that were jogging. They were data literate, but they could probably go some further with some bit help or better shoes or a better pathway to kind of jog along. Then there was some that were walking, didn't really want to run yet or jog, but certainly content with walking. Maybe they were data aware, but needed some help and some support to think about encouraging them into the jogging phase. And then, of course, like with all spectrums, there was some that did not like to or want to run, and we called those the data challenged. And I think for us, we proactively, when we worked out the spread of our kind of stakeholders, we thought, well, actually, we needed to decide where we want to and actually work with those that were maybe willing and able to first, like the walkers or the joggers, to move their level of maturity, rather than maybe starting with those that didn't really want to run anyway, and then we can come back and revisit those later. So for us, starting with a 2x2 matrix, very simple, and thinking about our stakeholders was really, really, really important. And I think for us, and I'm sure you guys are like, that actually can be quite frustrating when you're working with some of the data challenged. And we were, really thinking about, oh, wouldn't it be good if all of our stakeholders could be data scientists and they totally got data and they understood it end to end and really help us deliver our strategy. But actually, when you think about it, you don't really want everyone to be data scientists. And I think we realised that actually what we were trying to do was to ensure that everyone can understand and use data in their roles based on the decisions they were trying to make, not trying to make everyone become a data scientist. So for us, that's when we then developed these personas. And I think in ECC we have more than 9,000 employees. So for us, we felt that data literacy is needed everywhere, but data literacy can be different things to different people. And therefore, we need different levels of capability within those roles. And data literacy will look different for all of them. So for us, we started to think about data literacy in terms of a fluency or a kind of spectrum. And for us, it's about the ability to kind of make data informed decisions, and that will range for different groups. So personas are a great way of kind of segmenting your audience, understanding, analysing your audience, thinking about who you're engaging with, who is using it, and who needs to do what to get to an end goal. So for us, we settled with 5 key personas. We've got our ambassadors on the left-hand side there. So these are kind of senior leaders and executives with an interest in sponsoring and championing the cause. They are kind of really responsible for driving the strategic agenda of the organisation or our partners. We've then got some influencers, so they're kind of advocates with an interest in making evidence-based decisions on their day-to-day basis, whether that's a commissioner using it to commission a new activity or decommission something, whether that's a service manager who has to prioritise a list of cases that they need to see, or whether it's a team leader that is coming up with a plan for the team for the year. So for us, those kind of range from different types of manager roles, but real kind of influencers and people that need to make evidence-based decisions. We've then got our operators or enablers, where they are people who kind of consume or create data as part of their day-to-day business domain. And they are roles like data quality officers, system trainers, business analysts, and they will support other people to maintain good quality data and sometimes generate that data and input it into relevant system processes. And I think for us, we focus more on our data maturity and data literacy agenda for people on the left-hand side rather than the right-hand side, which we'll come to later on in the agenda. And then just on the right-hand side there, we've got the insight professions, so kind of professionals that routinely manage, retrieve and analyse data, so more advanced uses of that data and your kind of personas that sit probably within your teams. And also recognising our data engineers and data developers who technically support the implementation of data management and architecture across the organisation. And really important that we needed to know that actually what was the roles that these people needed to do and what types of capabilities and data literacy levels did they therefore need. So if you flick to the next one for me, Mark. So to determine that scale, it's an easy starting point to articulate how we want our personas to behave. And this is an example of our ambassador persona in relation to that senior decision maker. So for us, we wanted to be really clear on what does it mean in relation to how they can read data, how they can work with data, how they can reason with data, and that includes analysing it and using it to generate hypotheses, and actually how do they communicate with data in relation to decisions that they make. So for us, we thought, well, what's the good, what's the bad? So if you started with the bad in relation to kind of reading data, actually a senior leader might just cherry pick things and justify their decisions based on a fixation of one thing that they've seen or a pretty chart they might have seen in relation to an insight piece. But actually, if you flip that around, actually, what does good look like? You know, good is making sure that senior leaders can ask good questions. They don't take the data at face value, and they think about what does the data tell us? What does this mean? Or what types of questions might it allow us to think through further? So they needed to be aware of the value of data as an asset and aware of the variety of different techniques that we could use to support with that question. I'm not going to go through all of these, but if you just take another example here in relation to working with data. So actually, you know, a bad example here is using kind of a very ad hoc approach, time limited, or saying, actually, I need a data person to help me with something now. And actually, that's the behaviours we were trying to avoid within the organisation, encourage people to move away from. So how do we make sure people are coming to us sooner, asking good questions, but actually knowing what data might exist or how to use existing self-serve reports to actually support them answering the questions themselves. And I think that approach of then taking the kind of the good, the bad and the ugly and just thinking through what do we want these behaviours to be of senior leaders who are making evidence-based decisions, and what have we actually got at the moment and where do we need to make that shift? So for us, that helped us to create a kind of data literacy learning programme tailored to individual roles. And actually we targeted that to help people within their activities based on the things they were trying to do. And for us, that has meant we've formed programs like data talk sessions across Greater Essex. We've run data masterclass with over 1,000 people that have kind of completed that activity. And we've created bespoke workshops for teams to come together to actually explore how they could increase their data literacy and data maturity scores. And that's applied to different levels of the organisation, including managers, commissioners, and senior leaders. So maybe enough of kind of stakeholders and the importance of starting with your personas. It's a good place to start, and for us, I think we've done a lot of learning about what does good look like in a data strategy. So for us, whilst we absolutely said that data is everyone's business, it was really important that we thought about what the outcomes are that we're trying to achieve with our data strategy. And for us, we broke our data strategy into 4 key memorable components. So partners, how do we collect data and collaborate with our partners to improve outcomes? Processes, how do we make sure we're addressing the root cause of something and not just the symptoms that we see? Our people, making sure we are connecting people across the organisation to build capacity and capability. And lastly, potential, fostering a culture that turns our insight into knowledge and knowledge into action. And as part of our data strategy, we worked up 12 ambition statements, 4 under each of these kind of 4 pillars, to actually achieve by 2025. And they were based on the things that, as data professions, we thought was really important for the organisation. You know, kind of things that we absolutely needed to do, stuff that we needed to achieve, stuff that we knew the organisation really needed to invest in. And we took it to our corporate leadership team and they signed it off. And it was like, great, fantastic. Everyone signed off our ambitions for 2025. Everyone signed off our strategy. Great, we can get cracking and start delivering it. And it was not like that at all. So if you flick to the next slide for me, please, Mark. I think 8 months in after we've written and published our data strategy, we were like, oh my God, we are not achieving anything that we had written. And it was really demoralizing, if I'm honest. And it was just like, why the hell have we written a data strategy if it's not going to help us achieve anything? So I sank into a giant tub of ice cream, very plain vanilla ice cream on the sofa. And I really started to panic. And I thought, God, no one's going to help us deliver this strategy. No one really cares about it. And it was a real struggle to actually get people to turn up to the table to help us think about the actions we needed to take. And that was despite having some really engaged key sponsors and stakeholders as part of the initial conversations. So I guess it was at this point we actually started to work with Gartner, and it was very timely for us to get an outside perspective. And I think we learned that a data strategy is more of a journey. It's a journey to becoming data driven. It's a continual effort, and it's not just a one-off set of programs or activities or stuff that we're asking people to do that's probably on top of their day jobs. So I think we realised that if we really wanted to realise the ambition of our strategy, which was a good strategy, just didn't have the commitment of buy-in behind it, is we needed to unlock the value of what that strategy could mean for people. And for us, we wanted to make sure it wasn't a door wedge that just kind of sat on the floor somewhere or on the shelf collecting dust, but we needed to bring it to life. We needed to stop thinking about it as a set of products, projects, and deliverables, and start thinking about it as kind of new ways of working, new habits, new behaviours that we wanted everyone to adopt because they could see the value in doing so. So with a bit of check and challenge, we soon realised that our strategy did contain the right ingredients, but the biggest flaw, that it actually wasn't aligned to the business outcomes that the business needed to achieve in the first place. So no wonder there was a lack of buy-in to help us deliver it. So you just flick to the next slide for me, please, Mark. What did we do to change that? Well, for us, we thought about bringing it to life as best we could. So that boring ice cream that we had, let's turn it into an ice cream sundae. Let's put lots of different flavours in there and different outcomes that would interest people, not just kind of one thing that was a one and done for everybody. So for us, we wanted to remember that we had different stakeholders with different needs and different outcomes. So we started talking about it in relation to something that will help people to achieve their business goals. And we started to align some of the initiatives that we'd written in our data strategy plan to things that the business were trying to achieve, and turned that into something that people could then see the value from and bring it to life as that kind of 3D pop-up book. And that really helped to kind of turn the curve on the appetite we were getting and the interest we were getting from some of our key stakeholders. So we ran through our original set of recommendations in the data strategy and aligned them with a why. Why were these things important to the organisation in the first place? Why were they important to some of our stakeholders? What type of goals was it trying to help the organisation to achieve, not just the goals that we were trying to achieve with the data strategy? And for us, that helped us to kind of align the role of our data literacy learning agenda into things like the people plan. It helped us to align things like modernising our data warehouse to the cloud modernisation programme and our tech services plan. It allowed us to align some of our data sharing projects to the health and social care integration agenda instead. And that was a completely different way of thinking about it. So for us, I guess we learned that a good data strategy is a business strategy infused with data and not the other way round. And that a successful strategy is one that needs to be kept alive and agile and grows as the organisation evolves, not just something that is kind of time limited, task bound, or a static document. And I think for us, we importantly learned that it needs to be an enterprise wide approach and a way of working that the organisation can adopt, not just a kind of standard set alone set of activities that's kind of separate to what the organisation is also trying to deliver. So just before I hand back to Mark, I guess kind of reiterating that one of our biggest lessons that we've learned is be outcomes focused. Find your why, involve your people from the very start. For each stakeholder, find out their pain points, find out their challenges, understand what their priorities are. And if you can clearly define an outcome for every single stakeholder, and you've worked through that that's important to them and action can be taken as a result of that, then think about actually how data analytics can actually help the organisation to achieve that outcome, not the other way around. So start with the outcomes, not the data, and start with the business problem, not the solution.
Thanks, Nikki. Okay, so we've talked about data, we've talked about strategy, we've talked about some of those key stakeholders, we've talked about defining the outcomes. There's the bit around the people, and we know that changing people and changing people's behaviours is hard. I'm sure some of you, many of you will have seen the Venn diagram, the people process technology Venn diagram. It's a really, really common one that's kicking around all over the place. And what we can easily do is change the word technology for data, because we've still got people and we've got process, but the technology bit can be swapped into data. And in reality, in the original diagrams, it tends to be that they're all the same size circle, but actually in reality, it's probably more like this. So we know that the process part of it is relatively small. There's not huge amounts of changes realistically that we need to do to make this better. Data is quite a significant part, but we know that the people element, it's the people that are entering the information, it's the people that are managing the information, it's the people that are using the information, it's people's abilities to think about how that information supports them and think beyond the fact that it is just an audit tool, like I mentioned at the beginning. So the comms element of it becomes really, really important. And this is, to get it to land right, is really, really critical. It's about having lots of open and difficult conversations with people, particularly as you get into AI spaces, and we'll touch on ethics. There is a whole pile of concern in that space about how information is used. And we have interesting conversations around public perception of what a local authority is doing with information, and they actually expect that we're doing a lot more with the information than we are in quite a lot of cases. So there's definitely a tension there that needs to be worked through and understood. I started with a bit of a joke about data strategies for data nerds, right? Preconceptions are absolutely a challenge to getting this over the line. The concept that data belongs to data teams is a small part of the organization. As Nikki's highlighted, it's everybody's responsibility. It's absolutely a team sport to make sure that we're managing this and all involved at the right level. But in order to do that, it has to be non-technical, because people can't engage with things that they don't understand, or they'll find it really difficult to engage with the things that they don't understand. And drawing the lines to people, there is an emotional context to information, the data that we hold, and actually that needs to be that kind of golden thread that follows through, that actually we're doing this because the ultimate outcome on the end is a better life for a person generally. So making sure that we draw those lines, making sure that we get those outcomes. And don't sugarcoat it. The worst thing that we can do is go into this and say, oh yeah, we're going to have these magical tools and there's a silver bullet and we can just fix the data. That's absolutely not the case. There's a whole pile of hard graft in here that just to make this work actually will take effort, and it will take resource, and it will cost money in the short term, but that will absolutely pay and reap dividends in the long run. So communication becomes a really, really critical part of that. Nikki.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Mark. And it can be quite overwhelming, right? You've got all those components that you're thinking about, and you're like, where do I start? What ones are most important to kind of pick through first? So I think our advice collectively to you is kind of don't eat the elephant. Maybe we should have an elephant there, but break the strategy down into themes and make it kind of smaller and chunkier for people to digest. So you might already have a bit of a vibe in your organisation about what are the areas you think are of concern. That might be about your people and your culture, as we've kind of talked through. It might be more about data quality and actually the processes around data governance and data management. It might be things that link to your data platform and your architecture and how you're able to share data across boundaries or scale approaches accordingly based on the tech that's available. It might be around the skills and capabilities we have within the organisation to actually analyse that data and turn it into insight, an insight that can drive decision making. Or it might be other things about kind of accountability and the value that we're getting of that data and how decisions are actually made. So lots of key components there that you can kind of think about breaking your strategy down into the key components that might be more important. But I think the important advice for us is don't start there, right? From a data profession, I have to start with the data. So we have to recognise that every organisation will be different. We might have similar challenges, but there might be different outcomes and pain points and different foundations of where organisations are starting. So for me, it's not a case of cut, paste strategy onto another organisation. Top tip, start with a data maturity assessment. It will give you a concrete evidence base to work from and a baseline of where your organisation is in relation to that maturity. So don't go straight first into writing a strategy, as tempting as it is. Step back, use your data skills and think about, well, actually, how do we assess how well we are as an organisation and where are our pain points in the first place? For us, the data maturity will actually turn the strategy into something that works in practice. So it is practical. And actually, without kind of maturity, a data strategy is just words on a page. So, with data maturity, it becomes the way people actually work. So for us, we wanted to kind of do a data maturity assessment to help us work out where we needed to invest and where we didn't need to invest, working out what's strong, what's weak, where are the gaps, what to prioritise next, and actually prevent wasted effort being spent in places that it necessarily didn't need to be done. So in 2019, we actually done our first data maturity assessment as an organisation, and we followed up on a quite regular basis to understand how things have changed. And for us, we did use the basis of the local government maturity framework in its very early days, but it really helped us to assess our strengths, our weaknesses, and importantly, gives us insight from the decision makers across all parts of our organisations and portfolios. And for us, we chose to do this as a series of interviews with kind of our data advocates in relation to each portfolio area, because we didn't just want to do an average for the organisation. An average will sometimes hide a multitude of sins. So for us, we really wanted to get an understanding of the big areas of concerns and the big pain points within the different functions that helps us to understand the targeted responses that need to be in our data strategy. Our kind of data maturity framework had 20 questions, I think very simple questions over 5 domains, which you can see on the slide here. And that included things like data use, data awareness and culture, data management, data skills and capabilities, and finally, data governance. And for us, that really helped us to understand our starting position, as well as what things were really important to cover in our strategy. And I think when we analysed our results, some of which you can see on the diagram on the right-hand side, whilst ECC actually had okay levels of data maturity, there was wide variation around those themes of where we were struggling the most. And actually, when we then split it down to different professions or different functions, wide variation between data maturity across the different portfolio areas. So they became our areas of focus for the data strategy and our starting position as to how we wrote the content. And it also told us who we specifically needed to work with and what the domains were where we needed to focus. And for us, they were things like data management, data skills and training, and actually outcomes in relation to how we use data to inform those decisions in the first place and monitored it. And I think there are kind of, if you wouldn't mind flicking to the next slide, please, Mark, there are many different models that you can use to assess data maturity. And this one here has kind of 5 simple layers, whether that is beginning, so kind of manual reporting to achieve kind of basic compliance. Yes, your data might be siloed and you have limited kind of asset awareness, but actually you are beginning on that journey. Right the way through to kind of mastering. So we've got emerging, learning, developing, and then mastering. So poll time for you guys again, since we've done a lot of talking at you, is where would you assess your organisational level of data maturity today? Have a think about that in relation to your total organisation, and maybe just internally think about some of the pockets that you've got in relation to the differences between functions, and that might give you a clue as to where some of the places are that would be helpful to start. Just submitting my own vote. There you go. Oh, I've lost the results. They are somewhere in the chat. Can you see the results there, Mark? There we go. So overall, I think we've got about 38% on the emerging kind of phase, 32% in the learning phase, 13% in the developing phase. No one admitting to mastering, which is good because it means we're not there yet. And then another 14% in the kind of beginning phase. So thank you for doing that. That's super helpful. Mark, where would you rate your organisation?
I think I would probably put us in the emerging phase as well. I think particularly LGR has had an impact in terms of we've had 8 different organisations come together with very differing levels of maturity, and actually that kind of common denominator across those 8 actually is the lowest common denominator, and that's what you've got to kind of work up from. So yeah, absolutely, we might have had different advancements in different former organisations, but we're definitely working to a base and trying to build back up from it. How about you?
Perfect. I think I'd go developing in relation to our journey that we've been on over the last 5 years. But I think that's because we've done a lot of the groundwork up until that point. So yeah, but it's super good to see the differences. So I guess just to conclude on data maturity, there is a lot of useful frameworks out there to kind of help you assess where you are, and a lot of them are free as well. So a couple of links there to help assess yourselves and your organisation, but I would encourage you to do it not in a silo, but with your organisation in relation to a conversation, because you'll get a lot more rich insight out of that. And I think the other useful thing about the data maturity is that you can then assess yourself as to where you are to other people using those frameworks. So then it helps you to identify other organisations that you might want to speak to and reach out to help overcome challenges together.
Thanks, Nikki. And, we've covered quite a lot of ground so far, so just a little bit of a quick recap. So hopefully we're now all on the same page in terms of what data is, and we now have a good view of how we can think about what that vision might be and how we can play that through into a strategy. An awareness of stakeholders and kind of what we need to think about and how we can engage with those. Obviously, that communication with both those stakeholders and the wider organisation, and the kind of the language that we might use around that. And then the last bit that we've touched on there around our organisational maturity. And once you've got your baseline, it's then almost looking at the next step, which is, and what's our target? And that'll give us that kind of gap between, and you can prioritise the areas that you think are the most important for your particular organisation to try and move forwards. So we've got the bit of paper, we've come up with a plan, we've drawn it out, but you've got to make it happen. So I guess the next part of it is around implementing that vision. So that's where we're going to go in kind of the second half of this, and we'll move on to that. So I'll pass this back to you, Nikki.
Cool, thank you. So as Mark said, you can have that bit of paper, you can have that plan, you can have the good technology, you can have the best intentions, but I think without kind of capability, nothing will change. So kind of capability is a little bit of that engine room behind the kind of running of the data strategy, and building capability ensures that people can access, interpret and apply data correctly. It means that teams maybe might not be bottlenecked from kind of a small number of experts running around the organisation. And it actually means that insight can be created closer to the point of the decisions that we're trying to make in the first place. So capability building for us is about shifting our efforts from data wrangling into insight and insight into action. And I think a wonderful analogy there in the kind of Formula One kind of pit A car can only win if the pit crew can perform a tyre change in under 2 seconds. And that level of performance doesn't happen by accident. It happens because everybody knows their role, everybody is trained, everyone has the right skills, everyone practices together, and everyone has trust in the process that is going to work, and they know what they're doing. You will only be as fast as your slowest wheel gun operator, so your data strategy needs to be exactly the same in relation to what you do for thinking about building capacity and capability within your organisations. So we've looked at kind of different data teams within local government, if you wouldn't mind flipping to the next slide. And actually, when you think about it, a decade ago, traditional insight and intelligence teams within the public sector were 70% focused on pure business intelligence, reporting and performance activity. And whilst that is still absolutely still important today, it has changed in relation to the proportion of the time that those intelligence teams are actually spent doing those activities. So due to an increase in data volume, velocity and variety, along with more complex and cross-cutting challenges, that shift has been more to kind of value add analytical approaches and how we can use our data to help inform kind of problem decisions and choices that we have to make. And that requires us to kind of change our capacity and capability to undertake that type of work within the data community. We know that kind of national research indicates that companies that actually invest in analytics have a 33% higher revenue growth, 12 times more profit growth, and a 32% higher return on investment than their peers. So really important to also think about, whilst we're trying to influence the organisation in relation to the strategy and the deliverables, how do we also think about the change that has to happen within our internal data teams? So I think Mark said it before, but data is a team sport. We absolutely like to think of data as a team sport. And actually, data analytics teams will be made up of lots of different analytical skills. And for us, it's important that we can't just focus on one single skill or component. We need all of those components to come together to make it work and create the kind of unison. So analytics is, no, it's not just a bunch of skeletons, although you might think that based on the first slide. It's made up of some core key skills that includes things like problem identification. That's the bones of a project, right? It's the structure that holds things together. You would fall apart if your bones were not correctly assembled. So how do we make sure we understand what's the problem we're trying to solve? The second one, you may flip to the second one. Blood that flows through everything, data management. We need to be able to manage our data effectively so it doesn't clog up somewhere. It's accessible to the parts of the body where blood is actually required, or data in this instance. Next one over, data literacy and data culture. So we need to make sure that we've got the key vital ingredients that are important to work for continued operation and that things are moving accordingly. We need to make sure we then have kind of data science and analytical techniques that we can apply to business problems. So that is the brain that holds things together, if you wouldn't mind clicking next one on. And that will be the kind of statistical know-how and the data science know-how that we can apply to those problems and the data. And then lastly, really important, that actually it's the body, it's the skin that brings everything together. We need to be able to storytell, we need to be able to influence the organisation to take action as a result of the insight that we might have found. And actually, we need to make sure we are showcasing all that good work in a way that is understandable and easy to digest. So for us, we've really focused on how do we make sure that problem identification, data management, data culture and literacy, data science and storytelling and influence is key skills that our workforce actually have in the analytical community. And that could be within our centre of excellence, but also wider in the wider organisation, to make sure that they are connected into a community of practice that can help people to build those skills and capabilities to drive the agenda forward.
Brilliant, thanks, Nikki. So I've mentioned it before about data describing people. We've got a team, so we've got the plan, we've got a team of people. We now need some infrastructure to be able to underpin that so that we can actually start to work from that. And again, that infrastructure, like I say, it holds more than just the data. It's about describing people. And from a North Yorkshire Council perspective, we created a character called Dorothy. Our friend's Nora's Dotty. I think we're all friends here, so you can call her Dotty too. And what Dotty's trying to describe is that if you take the information from just one system, or from one small organisation, you kind of get this rough, fuzzy outline of what Dotty looks like. You can broadly tell some things about her, you can broadly make some kind of high-level decisions, but you don't really know her. And actually, The infrastructure is about bringing that information together. So actually, if we bring the information from lots of different services around a local authority, or bring outside information from the likes of health, or Department for Work and Pensions, central government, and so on and so forth, that actually perhaps we don't get the rough, vague, black and white dotty outline. We get the full colour, holistic version of dotty. And actually, when we've got that view of dotty, then actually that means that we can hopefully make better, more educated decisions, which actually ultimately give her the best version of her life. So that's quite a big thing. I've talked about multiple different organizations there. So from an architectural approach, that's really tricky because that brings in things like data sharing agreements and complexity. So start within your own organization. We can absolutely have the data lake view, that's the phrase, isn't it? The data lake. We want this amazing vista. We want absolutely everything. It's going to be picture perfect. But there's a bit of reality because this is huge and it's complicated and it's big. And reality, you're not going to start at the vista. We're probably going to start more like a small child in their wellies, jumping in the puddle. So think about data puddles rather than data lakes. How can we step into this in a small way, little bit, start to feel, start to understand, start to play with the text, start to play with the tools, and work our way through to evolve and develop that architectural approach, but from small beginnings. So big aspirations, but a small way to start. The other thing that's really important around the architecture is standards. Standards absolutely matter. And by standards, I don't mean everybody has their own standards, because by proxy, that means that they aren't standards. This is looking at things like, one login for government. You've got things like open referral. There's the Data Standards Agency that sits as part of GDS within central government. You've got the likes of the Open Data Institute who are doing some work around looking at how you can match together records across multiple organizations. So we get kind of that golden record of an individual and how that might work. And then there's organizations like iStand that have something called Savvy, which is scalable approach to vulnerability via interoperability. And that's how can you find vulnerability identifiers in a consistent way that can be shared across lots of different organizations. So that's just literally a light scattering of some examples of data standards, but it's the types of things that you need to be thinking about when you're starting to look at how you pull that information together into that architecture. How are we going to store it? Do we look at things like common data models? So rather than having the concept of an adult or a child, you have a person, and it is only the viewpoint and the context that you look at it at that decides whether it's an adult or a child. So we can start to think in different ways and break down some of those silos, because we don't want to think about life journeys as being the verticals of the different services that are provided. We want to think as horizontal across all of them. And actually things like, could the solution to an adult social care problem, rather than it being earlier in adult social care, actually it could be in children's social care, for example. So standards are really, really important. We're talking about data, so we can't not go anywhere near compliance, and we need to be really careful, because actually it's a set of skills, and there's a balance that compliance and value need to be considered. There's a really unfortunate way in the way that GDPR has been pitched that it's quite often used as a wall, it's used as a barrier. That's just a perception thing. It's the way that it was kind of marketed, and people have interpreted that. The words in it are actually totally different. The words are about how can this enable, how can this allow you to use the information safely, ethically, and deliver the best possible outcome. And that's a mindset shift. We use a little Formula One example earlier around the teams. I'm use a slightly different one now. And this isn't mine, so I don't know who it came from originally, so apologies if somebody does. But it's a great analogy, and it's around thinking of data governance being like brakes on a Formula One car. The immediate perception of that is brakes, Formula One car, big, lots of stopping power, slowing things down. That's kind of where it goes. And you can flip the script on that, though, and think about that in a different way. And actually, the brakes are the confidence that you can push the extra hundredth or thousandth of a second. And when you brake, if you need to stop, you have absolute confidence that you can do. So rather than thinking it as the thing that slows you down, think of it the thing that's the enabler that allows you to go a little bit quicker. But if you have to stop, it's the wraparound in the governance that allows you to do so. So there's just a little bit of a mindset shift in that. And if we get that, we can be a bit more creative about it.
Perfect. And I feel like I should continue the car analogy there. So I guess just because you can go fast doesn't mean you should go fast.
This is right.
So also important to think about ethics and our ethical approaches to how we are using data. As public sector organisations, we hold some of the most sensitive data about our residents' lives. And I think therefore, ethics makes sure that we are considering the way we use data with respect, with care, and it kind of only the only ways that it actually genuinely benefits people and doesn't risk and harm some of the decisions and choices that we make for those vulnerable people. So yeah, just because you could doesn't mean you should, and I think important that we can consider that even more when we think about AI moving forward. So for us, we've already started to think about ethical uses of data, particularly in relation to our predictive use of data when we do predictive models, and also when we think about it to target and prioritize some of our activity. So for us, some of the four things that we've done on this kind of slide here. So we've got things like sharing tools and resources. We've developed or we've utilized the ODI's consequence scanning toolkit and their data ethics canvas, which is super helpful. We've got a data and research section about ethics on our Insight portal for decision makers and also data professions. We've integrated ethics into some of our processes by embedding those ethical questions into our scoping guidelines and our project lifecycle. And we've actually invested in a data ethics committee, which is an independent data ethics committee hosted by ECTA, which is our Essex Centre for Data Analytics. And they help us to think about our projects in relation to assessment of risk, mitigations of that risk. And actually, it's a field of experts made up of so many different industry specialists and lay people of Essex to make sure that we have considered that before we think about deploying anything. We've offered training and support in relation to data ethics training, both internal to our team and kind of external. We've launched the community to practice where we've had ethical workshops and ethical masterclasses, and we've actually got a kind of My Learning module that's in progress where we do have some ethics modules as part of that. And then lastly, just making sure that ethics conversations is a part of the work in relation to delivering analytics and data science and particularly AI projects. Ethics is relevant to all of our roles, and the broader discussion we think helps us to have a better conversation about the decisions and the choices that we're making and how we actually make decisions now, regardless of whether they're data driven. So yeah, really important that we can consider ethics as part of that.
And on those ethical considerations and conversations, one of the tools that North Yorkshire's created is an AI ethics impact assessment. So as part of delivering any piece of AI development, we have a robust conversation. So there's a group of stakeholders from, technology, from data, from services to get involved in that conversation. And there's the usual things that you would expect in there around, technical robustness and safety and transparency. But it also goes into things like human agency and dignity and diversity and inclusiveness. So actually, it's not just the technical side of it. It's making sure that we bring that part in that actually, if we're doing something and it gives you that kind of weird, icky feeling, it's probably not okay. And actually, we shouldn't be doing it. And it's that comment that Nikki made there about just because you can, it doesn't mean that you should. We said that we'd touch on AI for you. Just before we get into that, a quick question. Again, think of this in your brain. When someone says AI to you, what does that mean? I suspect most people have probably gone here. It's world domination. It's robots. It's suppression. This is what's taking over. I did just have Terminator, and I kind of thought I should put Terminator 2 in as well, just for those people that were born slightly later. I won't make any judgments about which one is the one that's closest and most relevant to you guys. But this is what Hollywood makes us think. This is where our brain immediately goes. This is where society goes when we think about AI. We think about the robots. What was really funny was that I asked Copilot, draw me a picture of what you think AI was, and it went to world domination with robots as well. So it went really dark, really sinister. Even the mechanics out of the side of it, the neck, it was definitely there. But that's not what it is, because if you go and look at the Cambridge Dictionary, it's computer systems or machines that have some of the qualities that the human brain has. It's the ability to recognize patterns and kind of do that analysis. No mention of world domination. But that's one of the tricks and challenges that we're trying to work past. So you've got the kind of Hollywood version versus reality. And why does that matter from a data perspective? Well, we get this concept of AI deserts and jungles. And where the analogy is that if you think about your data, and particularly good quality data being water, and you think about your AI capabilities being foliage, In the desert, where you've got none of this water, it absolutely stifles your ability to grow anything and develop anything. You get very few leaves. If you move to kind of your rainforest scenario, you've got that really wet environment, you've got that abundance of water, that great quality data, and actually those AI capabilities have a real opportunity to flourish.
Perfect, thank you. And I think kind of we can't not talk about AI, right? So just as much as we talked about kind of our data strategy, we need to think about how our data strategy supports our AI strategy in relation to its evolving maturity within the organization. And the same principles in terms of how we talk about data strategy will apply to the AI strategy. And we have to recognise that it's all around us, but everyone's level of understanding of that is different. And part of our role is to help educate our workforce in relation to kind of that use of everyday AI that helps us to keep up and support productivity. But also our role as data professionals is to help the organisation to set the right level of ambition and vision for how we need to use AI to support transformation or change in relation to kind of our organisation. So for us, we invested in some kind of jeans and jumper session, as obvious as the picture there. They were formal sessions with our political leadership team and our corporate leadership team. And that is to help kind of cut through some of the hype and actually invest some time trying to educate people in what it is, what types of things it can help us do, what types of guardrails and principles need to be kind of deployed within the organisation about how we're going to use it, and actually assess what level of risk we're prepared to take and where we'd like to take that risk in relation to the opportunities. So we set up these jeans and jumper sessions with our political leadership team and our corporate leadership team to help educate people and inform people. And for us, that was a great opportunity to bring in external speakers in relation to kind of aspirations and educations, but also an opportunity to bring in other players about what other people are using it for and how they're starting to see some of the benefits, but also some of the risks that go alongside that. So navigating the hype was really, really important for us. So we didn't just make some of the kind of quick mistakes that we know others have. I think if you flick to the next slides for us, as part of that, we then come up with, I think it was 6 proof of concepts, probably similar to many of you guys. But there are 2 major kind of risks with that, or major challenges. I think once people have got a little bit of an appetite on that merry-go-round, it looks very exciting. Yes, we all want a piece of that, and we want to carry on doing it for free, please. No money. But actually, you know, we have to recognise that we need to be able to pay for it. We need a responsible approach to implementation and maintenance of that. And that doesn't come for free, right? We need to invest in the capability, the capacity, the infrastructure to be able to deploy, monitor and maintain any AI projects or products. And actually, what we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There are so many opportunities to be had from kind of everyday use of AI to game-changing applications, and that pace of change is actually humongous. So we need to be able to be prepared to build capacity and capability internally, not just invest in kind of buying things. So how do we think about our approach to building, not just buying as part of AI? And we're still in the very early doors of that kind of agenda. But for us, it was important to start getting the organisation to think about the investment and the business case that we needed to approach. And for us, we realised that we needed a strong, but realistic view of return on investment, just as much as the conversation about return on employee as part of that business case. And therefore, that has helped us to get a business case over the line, thinking about those different dimensions. However, the one thing I guess that made a difference to us was trying to describe what the world might look like if we do or don't invest in this kind of space. So we kind of played back 4 different futures, you know, kind of what the world would look like if we stopped doing our AI proof of concepts, we didn't invest in any more, we didn't spend any more money on the agenda. Well, actually, you know, kind of decline and collapse was the worst case scenario. You know, kind of things would stop. We wouldn't be able to keep up with what the workforce were expecting about their ways of working. Very low cost, but very low ambition, and we're actually going to lose people as part of that. We then might go the other way, where we may be in a world of keep going but with what we've got, but have very little investment in terms of high levels of ambition and low cost. And there might be very unrealistic expectations as part of that in relation to what people are wanting, but not the investment behind it. On the top right-hand side, We could say, right, our approach is to go all in. We're going to have an AI directorate with full transformation. It's going to be embedded in everything that we do. Very high cost, very high ambition, and probably not the space that we're ready for yet as an organisation. So for us, we've gone to the top left-hand side, which is kind of more in a space of responsible with our innovation. We're going to test, we're going to learn, we're going to grow, and we're going to scale. And we're going to keep repeating that by investing in a small AI hub, which helps us to think about growing our capacity and capability and working with others, but in safe spaces that allow us to kind of learn and think about the patterns we can then deploy to similar business problems. But that just feels like a safe space for us that allows us to responsibly innovate whilst the kind of opportunities still continue to emerge and we still continue to build capability and capacity. So I guess as we kind of start to wrap up a little bit in relation to kind of what's next, you might think, okay, well, I've heard an awful lot, but where do I prioritise? What order would I might go things in? So this is just an example of what our delivery roadmap had looked like over the last 5 years. And they include some of the big deliverables of things that we have achieved and things that we have turned the curve around in relation to the conversations with the organisation. So they are things like having a data governance board and that meets on a regular basis to review the progress of the strategy, but to also understand the continual conversations about priorities, objectives in relation to pain points for our customers. We have things like communities of practice that come together on a very frequent basis to share skills and stories with one another and share best practice about kind of pieces of work and insights that they've generated as part of that. And actually, we've now got sub-communities of practice about engineering and AI that are starting to spin up. We've done things like publish an insights newsletter on a very regular basis to keep the conversations real and alive for people about how people are making evidence-based decisions. We've worked with our partners to develop a greater Essex data declaration. We've worked with our tech service colleagues to have a bit of a join up between kind of our digital and data priorities that support the kind of future activities. And then that's ongoing conversations. That means we are embedding it in our ways of working, not just one standalone set of activities. I mentioned we've invested quite heavily in our data literacy learning programme, and again that continues to expand into AI literacy and ethics literacy, as well as performance literacy. And then we have a big success for us is we've moved all of our data onto the cloud. So we're about 80% of the way there in relation to our migration to Azure Analytics. So we now have that cloud-based interoperable infrastructure that's really modernised us and made the data more accessible to not just to data professionals, but to improve the quality and speed of our self-serve reports for our customers. And I guess kind of in relation to where we are going next as an organisation, for us, it's really about how do we move from AI POCs to AI deployment. So think about that unstructured use of data coming in to support those activities, and how do we help to make sure we have the right infrastructure and setup to build things ourselves, not just buy off the shelf in relation to emerging tech that is available to help with some of our business problems. For us, our second priority is actually about the LGR challenge. So I think this was bold at the beginning. We've got a lot of work to come about what our landscape looks like in the future, and therefore really important that we continue to connect with our partners, think about how we can have standard approaches to our ops model for kind of data sharing, data standards, which is all really fundamental things that Mark talked through this afternoon. And then lastly, I think for me, it's really important that we can kind of talk about the impact as a result of the strategy and the work that's been done. So measurement of success and measurement of delivery is super, super important. And we have to be able to communicate to the organisation what's changed as a result. So for us, we had a very simple framework that we used during the kind of start of the strategy that we kind of formulated, and that helped us to measure some specific KPIs as part of the strategy. Our team has had outputs that lead to outcomes for our customers, which will generate impact for our organisation or our system. So for us, that's about our work, what value that has delivered, and what change that has then created. And that impact framework has been a really simple way for us to be able to then measure and communicate the change and the difference, and has continually allowed the conversation to naturally evolve into where we are now, really. And just to finalise for me, I think there are some differences that we're really starting to see as part of that. So when you think about our culture, we've kind of got a high quality leadership team and a culture that actually embraces evidence-based decision making, with kind of clear strategic direction to become more intelligent as an organisation. We recognise the current and future value of many of our data sources, and actually kind of recognise the importance of place-based, evidence-based approach as part of that, and continuing to work with our partners to have more data and data sharing. We are definitely seeing a turn from our customers asking much more good and open questions, and coming to us very early for kind of help to navigate their way through that. And actually more approaches to the effective blending of operational expertise, data and user insights to help people make decisions. Around governance, we actually have a much stronger governance arrangement in place than we've ever done before, and that's not just at corporate level, but that goes down to adult social care and children's social care, who actually have digital data and tech boards, government boards, within their functions, of which we are a part of. And we've actually standardised our infrastructure stack, which has increased the speed and efficiency of how we're managing and storing our data. And then lastly, we built quite a lot of trust in relation to the kind of skilled workforce that we have that are actually considered kind of experts in their field for analytics and data science. And that means we are delivering kind of pieces of work that are robust and can stand up to kind of scrutiny along the way, which is super important in the space that we're kind of pushing those boundaries into. So I think we are then just going to kind of wrap up with some of our key takeaways. So you've obviously heard quite a lot of some of the things that we've kind of talked through here today. And I guess just a reminder of some of those really important things that we would say is lessons that we've learned, or good starting positions, is start with understanding your baseline. So making sure that you assess your data maturity as an organisation or the functions that you're working with is, so understand your starting position. Make sure you think about your why, and making sure that anything that you're trying to do in your strategy aligns to the business outcome in the first place. So good data strategy is a business strategy infused with data, not the other way around. Make sure that you've got a clear and compelling vision that people can buy into. And actually, it's absolutely fine to start small, right? We don't have to eat the elephant, break it down into those bite-sized pieces and have a clear and compelling kind of vision that people can buy into. Think about making sure that you're building trust along the way, and actually sometimes you need to create a bit of FOMO for those kind of walkers that don't want to run, right? You want them to be a jogger, so actually creating a little bit of FOMO and fear of missing out, and building trust with stakeholders and people and sponsors along the journey is super important, not just the work that you are doing. Make sure it's accessible, bring it to life. Hopefully we've given you lots of different ways you can bring things to life with analogies today, but I think you can deliver a great piece of work, but if you can't make it land, then you've lost the cause. So really important to make sure you're doing that extra 10% to think about bringing it to life and making it accessible. I think it's important to not recognise that you don't have to go everywhere all at once. So to think about targeting some key advocates, targeting some key specific outcomes you want to achieve, or case studies that you'd love to kind of walk away with at the end of your period. So just think about, targeting your activity that those that might benefit from the most and where you're likely to see more change. Build capacity and capability along the way, and don't forget about making sure that you can get some leadership and buy-in at the top that will not only hold you to account, but help you to hold the organisation to account on some of the things that you want to try to achieve.
Okay, so I think just to wrap it up, one last thing to say, and it would have been absolutely remiss as a person from North Yorkshire not to get a Wallace and Gromit reference in there, is that while the world of AI and data feels like this, it feels like we're trying to lay the road, lay the track while we're traveling along it, and it's all at breakneck speed, that we're all doing it. You're absolutely not alone. We're all trying to work through this. We're all trying to understand this. And even if you look at AI, even big tech haven't got it all squared and sorted either. So there's absolutely an opportunity to make sure that we are collaborating and working together, and the LGA is a great advocate for this, that actually we have this opportunity that when we come together, we can do amazing things. Anyway, with that, we'll say thanks for listening and open it up for any questions. So I'll pass back to you, Mark.
Thanks ever so much for that. That was an absolutely amazing presentation there. Really interesting to hear about the leadership buy-in, stakeholder engagement, so much more there to take away, and I'm sure many on the call will agree with me that there's lots to take away and definitely lots to think about. We do have some time now, though, to go through some of the questions that the audience have been asking. There is a lot on there, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. But please do jump in, speakers, if there's more to add as well. So let's have a look what we got. Please do also continue to upvote your questions as well. So the top rated question is, what were the size capacity of your staff/team when developing the data strategy? Additional resource needed, and what is standard capacity now that the implementation is business as usual?
Do you want me to go first, or do you?
Go on, after you.
Okay, so North Yorkshire Council, our post LGR data strategy has literally just been signed off, so it's currently with our comms team that are doing the prettification of that. I think that's a word. And basically, we've got around about 40 FTE as a team that's delivering. Is that enough? Absolutely not. Do local authorities and central government invest enough in data in relation to private sector teams? Absolutely not. So you will always, I suspect, so I wouldn't sugarcoat it, I would always expect that you're going to feel under-resourced. But for a North Yorkshire perspective, about 40 FTE. Nick?
Yeah, nice. And actually, similar in numbers, although slightly different in setup. So we have 30 FTE just within our data analytics teams. They are dedicated to delivering data analytics projects and data science projects, very much also helping deliver the data strategy and achieve the data strategy. And they do work with our partners at the same time. And then we actually have an additional 30 FTE that's dedicated and responsible for performance and business intelligence. And that shift has really helped us to make sure that we are not spending all of our capacity on statutory returns and reporting needs and performance reporting. Whilst it's super important, we've actually got the organisation to realise that having capacity, making better use of your data to help people to develop their business cases, or even thinking for the business case, and understanding of how we might be able to get ahead of the curve in relation to some of our challenges, has actually been super valuable. And that has continued in relation to that kind of investment of the two different teams, although we are coming together as one kind of function at the moment. And for us, we've had very small amount of money to help us with the data strategy, but every small amount of money has helped us in relation to bringing in additional skills or capacity that we wouldn't necessarily have had. So some of the data infrastructure kind of skills and engineering skills where we might needed to get some initial builds out of the way with, and that's kind of helped us to invest in that and learn from other people, and then we kind of build that into our business as usual based team. So a small amount of kind of money to support the activities of the data strategy over the last 5 years, but yeah, roughly about kind of 30 FTE in data analytics and 30 in performance.
Excellent, thank you very much. The next question is, you mentioned that the data strategy will take investment, but will pay dividends in the long run. What we're struggling with is proving the benefits case to my organisation for investment, and also how to monitor and report on benefits when a lot of it is reducing risk and raising capacity and capability, not savings. Anyone got a silver bullet for this?
Nice. Go on.
Do you want to go first on this? I'm just conscious it was my comment, I think, that I made it, but I'll let you go first.
So I definitely say there's no silver bullets, but I definitely think there is techniques that you can use. So we went back and looked 1 year on the projects that we had delivered that involved analytics and data science that made people were making different decisions, whether that was like a forecasting model to help them to prepare for the future, and think about where interventions need to be placed or where they need to be decommissioned. We also kind of had a look at what value the outcomes were maybe leading to. And I know that's necessarily sometimes one step removed, But in total, when we reviewed something like 12 of our projects, it was something like 1.5 million that it actually benefited the organisation. Well, that pays for my team. That's just the 12 projects, and there was many, many more that we delivered in that year. So for us, we kind of took a retrospective look at each of the things that we'd been working through to see if we could quantify them in terms of, well, what difference was made as a result? What was the end outcome we were trying to influence? And if we can map that through a little bit in relation to kind of outcomes, speed of decision making, reducing risk in relation to the unnecessary demands or failure demands that the organisation was dealing with as a result of that risk, you can then start to quantify things through. But you really need to break down the tangibles around like the decision that's being made or the thing that's being tried to influence as a result of the insight. So for us, we use kind of some case studies to demonstrate those points. And then we use some quantifiable evidence behind those projects that resulted in the tangible return on investment to the organisation, actually. And it was a really powerful thing to do and something I'd never really done before in relation to actually going back and looking at what difference the work had helped us to achieve. And in some respects, that helped us to work out a useful framework that we encourage our staff to do once they've delivered a piece of work.
Thank you very much.
I think I would add to that. So I think there's short-term stuff that's easier to articulate in terms of drawing a metric, and then there's longer-term things that are much more tricky. So, for example, if you've got something where data is supporting additional income generation, that's something where it's quite easy to try and draw a line to it in terms of those. If it's what change have we made to improve somebody's life over the next 20 years, well, that's absolutely going to go way beyond any kind of medium-term financial strategies and those types of things. So then it becomes much more difficult. There's also a whole pile of life factors that will be influencing that individual over that 20-year period. So those kind of qualitative changes, for me, I think are really difficult to track. And I think all you can do is talk about those. I think there's some things where if you can draw a clear line to a benefit, then that's good. What we were I've been really careful about and really open, honest and upfront about is, from a data perspective, I can only point a service in the right direction. I can't make the saving. I can suggest, that there's an opportunity here. I can demonstrate where the opportunity exists, but it's the service that needs to make the change. And this is where the engagement and the communication piece comes in, and it's really important. So there's a bit there that actually your savings probably aren't in your data program. They're not in your data strategy. They're in all of the other projects, as Nikki mentioned, elsewhere. And it's what percentage of those belongs to or is supported by data strategy. The other part to it, and this is a little bit of a cheeky, is take the opportunities for the things that have got traction right now. So use those as the Trojan horse. If it's the AI excitement, the buzz, and you've got a project, you can talk about, we need to do AI and data, and just sneak that through as kind of the side comment behind, because actually you know that you need to do those as foundational bits to do the other bit. So actually, rather than overtly saying it's the data strategy, it can be AI work which supports underpinning foundational elements of a data strategy. So just be a bit creative.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. The next question is, how did you handle conflicting departmental priorities when setting data governance standards?
So I think just if I answer it minus the data governance standards, then maybe Mark want to kind of chip in around that one. For us, we wanted to make sure that we were looking at kind of the trade-offs between the kind of feasibility and suitability of any requests that were kind of coming in. And of course, you need to think about the quality of the data that's as part of that. But there is this kind of trade-off between kind of, well, actually, if someone is going to make a decision anyway and they're not going to use what you've kind of provided, is that where we want to prioritize our efforts around kind of the work that we might do with them? So there was definitely something about the kind of suitability and feasibility of what's required. And we have a bit of an impact framework, or a bit of a framework that helps us to assess that around impact, stakeholder buy-in, data and data availability and data quality, alongside some of those other dimensions that will help us to work through whether or not we are ready to take a project forward in relation to what's being proposed for a customer. But I appreciate that's not necessarily about data governance.
So I think on the governance side of things, it depends on which governance you're talking about. So we've got obviously the hard line governance of what the law says in terms of how we should be handling and managing information, and things like the Data Use and Access Policy, Access Act that's been released last year. That's changed. That does create a whole pile of opportunity in there. So that actually opens doors, and that makes it really interesting. I think if it's internal governance in terms of your aspirations of what you would like to do and things that you need to get in place, is accepting that not everybody is going to come at this on this exactly the same journey. Those journeys will be different for people. And actually, if you try and force them all to be the same, that's probably counterproductive. So you may have one part of your organization, one service that's really far on that data journey. They've got amazing governance around it, and another area that doesn't, and that's okay. And it's just about working with those services at their own speed, because they might have other pressing priorities that for them, they could have statutory responsibilities and those types of things, and actually they do have to come higher up, and that's okay. So I think it's just about a bit of balance and pragmatism.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We've got time for a couple more questions, I think. So I'd like to understand if or how the data strategy was rolled into people's job descriptions. Often, it's just seen as extra things outside of core remits and hard to quantify for appraisals and contract renewals, etc.
So absolutely. You've just hit on my biggest bugbear. And the synergy that I draw to this is, if you think about something like budget management, you have budget managers, it's in their JDs, they get scored for it, so they might be paid slightly more because they're a budget manager. You have training from finance, you have support from finance, you do monthly forecasting. How many organizations out there have information asset owners that's in their job description? It's evaluated, they're fully trained, they're fully supported, and they're doing regular monthly quality reviews? I would suspect a very, very small percentage, if any. So absolutely, that's exactly the same journey. And my next challenge is with OD to go and make sure that I can look at things like, online learning. I can look at support around those individuals. If I can, I ideally want it in their job descriptions that they're an information asset owner and the responsibilities that are wrapped around that. So that's the trajectory of travel from a North Yorkshire perspective. But we're not there yet. We're just about to put our toe into that water. So yeah, it's not going to be an easy one.
No, and I'd say we also haven't embedded it into people's job profiles. Yes, for the data personas, we've made sure there's consistency in relation to those job personas and what we're expecting people to do around kind of standards and best practice, particularly for accountabilities. We've had similar conversations around people that support people to capture good data and maintain data around data quality, because when you look at the role and remit of an analyst is quite varied in relation to what people do. So there is some standardization of job profiles and job families that we've done across the organisation, but we've not done it in relation to decision makers. And I think for us, we've focused more a little bit about what are the decisions and the habits that we want people to get into, or what decisions they're trying to make and what habits do we need them to get into, rather than enforcing it. And I think for us, that's also reflective of I never expected to have such a large uptake on the data masterclass activities that we've done. And part of that hasn't been forcing people to do it and doing it via e-learning compliance, which I'm sure all organisations have got statutory things we have to do. Whilst that might be a nice thing to do, we have to recognise that everyone's levels need to be different around literacy. So for us, it's going back to the purpose of what you need the roles to do, and therefore conversations with those kind of post holders or teams responsible for those decisions.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've got time for one more quick question before the end, which is, what is the link between the performance management strategy for an organisation and the data strategy?
Want to come in first, Nikki?
So for us, we have never really had a formal performance management strategy. We've got the statutory ones that everyone has kind of worked through. We've only very recently started to work through a formal corporate performance strategy with the new outcomes framework. And for us, that's been off the back of conversations about how people are making smarter decisions and asking better questions off data. And I think for us, we were doing a lot of the reporting that was just very number county, Bean County, and I think we've tried to influence the organisation to think much more smartly about it's not just how much and how well, but it's also what difference has made a result, and therefore the performance management framework needs to slightly adapt to that, so it is kind of slightly more modernised. I guess in the background, it's slightly more influenced the way in which we are producing reports rather than the strategy in itself. So for us, it was really helped us to kind of think about the automation, the speed, the efficiency of which we can deliver those reports. So our workforce isn't spending 80% of the time churning the reports. It's actually spending, a small amount of time doing that and refreshing it. And actually, it's more about what the insight of that performance data is telling you. So for us, it's not really in the strategy, although I think that we've got a slight older approach to performance reporting across the organisation. So we've used the data strategy to kind of lever those conversations that we now need to have next with the organisation about performance.
And I think I would just add to that I think it's the timing bit for me. So I think where the data strategy to some degree drives the performance management strategy is that quite often performance management is what happened last quarter. And looking back at what happened last quarter, actually, what was the opportunity to put any measures in to try and affect or change that in somewhere? Or can we get to the point where actually we've got the data that supports our ability to look forward 3 months rather than backwards 3 months and look at what's coming and how can we affect behavior so that actually we improve performance more dynamically moving forwards? So I think that for me is the link between the two, is trying to get from that kind of retrospective into proactive.
Thank you ever so much. Unfortunately, we are now out of time and there is a lot more questions there. And so I just cannot begin to do these presentations justice today. We really didn't know what to expect from this event. It's a national problem, very local challenges to face. One of the things I've taken away from this afternoon, that it's not just an issue for those with data skills. It takes the whole organisational culture to recognise the value and skills in data, whether it's analytics, engineering, lots more. If you do find these topics useful, please do reach out to us, join our communities and get involved. There's a ton more that the LGA is doing more widely in data. We're here to find the information that you want. A big thank you to our speakers today. Not only have they given up their time to present, but they have been leaders in the sector, which is great to hear from people so passionate to make a difference. Thank you to everyone attending this afternoon as well. If you're watching this from recording, please do keep an eye out for our event so you can join in our discussions and have a lovely day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.